Western North Carolina businesses need your financial support now more than ever in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. This month, Darby Communications, based in Asheville, North Carolina, is donating its ad space here on the Rock Fight to help other outdoor businesses in Western North Carolina get back on their feet. Asheville local endurance brands Fuel Goods and Presio have started a fundraiser through their Together We Rise t-shirt campaign. 100% of these t-shirt sales will go to local outdoor businesses that have lost everything, like Rockgeist Bikepacking USA, a local bag maker, and Asheville Adventure Company, owner of Asheville's only climbing gym. Both businesses lost everything in the unprecedented flooding from Hurricane Helene, and you can get your Together We Rise shirt and support Western North Carolina at fuelgoods.com. Welcome to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True. It's Monday, and I'm here with producer Dave to give you some insights into some of the latest headlines to come out of the outdoor industry. But before we get to those, we have some housekeeping items and some programming reminders. If you're new around here, we would love for you to subscribe and join the Rock Fight by lobbing a stone at the follow button on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on. Also, if you give us that 5-star rating, that would be lovely. And be sure to come back to the Rock Fight on Wednesday, where Justin Hausman and I will be doing our annual Halloween outdoor movie review. Last year, we did the Blair Witch Project. This year, the original 1980 Friday the 13th. And be sure to check out our other podcast on the Rock Fight Podcast Network, and that's called Gear and Beer. And you can find it on the app you're using right now. All right, let's start the show. All right, subscribers to News from the Front, Rock Fight's newsletter, will recognize a few things I'm about to say because it was also the subject of my main piece in yesterday's edition of News from the Front. And if you're listening to this and you like this podcast, you really do need to subscribe to that newsletter. Just head over to rockfight.co and click join the mailing list. There's a lot of stuff that we talk about on the show. We expand over there. You get our action figures ahead of time. Anyway, there's the free ad for our newsletter. But anyway, so this Thursday, it's Halloween. That's my favorite holiday of the year. But I got to admit that given the turmoil of our presidential election, I really haven't felt much like celebrating spooky season. We don't have a lot of decorations up at my house this year, which is not normal. But there was one story that hit the outdoor trade aggregators this past week that sparked me to get into the Halloween mood, and especially coming off the heels of last week's episode on the Rock Fight, where we took a look at the demise of Vask at the hands of Red Wing. Because in some ways, Vask got off easy. Yeah, I really feel like it's better to be put to death than to become a zombie, which is what has happened to Marmot. And I bring Marmot up because this past Friday, SGB reported the Q3 financial results of Newell Brands. On the outdoor front, Newell owns Marmot, Coleman, and Ex Officio, as well as a few others. And the news wasn't great, with the company showing a nearly 21% decline compared with Q3 last year. And outdoor brands and owners of outdoor brands having a bad quarter isn't really all that surprising these days. But when one of your brands in your portfolio has a rightful claim to being on the Mount Rushmore of brands that built the modern outdoor industry, and I'll get to that in a second, it's worth the pause to ask, yeah, what happened here? So let's pull the curtain back on Marmot and talk about them for a minute. So Marmot started in 1971 as an outdoorsy club, and they first launched their products in 1974. And did you know the original order that really got them going was a order of custom parkas that were used in the film The Eiger Sanctions, starring Clint Eastwood? A little fun fact there for all you outdoorsy people to take around and impress your outdoorsy friends. From there, for the next 30 years or so, Marmot was an integral component to the growing outdoor industry. And like I said, it truly has a legit claim. They're not saying they're definitely there, but they have a claim to be on the Mount Rushmore of brands that the industry was built upon alongside the North Face, Patagonia, and I say Timberland. And despite my personal bias, conflict of interest in doing so, I put Timberland in that fourth spot because we need a footwear brand. They started in 1973, and despite their fashion or pop culture leanings, I mean, who else has had as large of an impact in the outdoor footwear space now that Vask is no more? And before producer Dave answers, I want to let him know that brown sneaker brand Merrell has been disqualified for being lame. So, until the early 2000s, Marmot regularly released innovative new products that kept their name in the conversation as one of those brands, and that outdoor enthusiasts would rattle off when considering who they wanted to buy a new piece of apparel or gear from. And that innovation pipeline culminated in 1999 with the release of the Marmot Precip. It was a sort of crossover SUV of outdoor apparel using proprietary waterproof membranes, and the Precip had performance chops, but carried a more mainstream price tag of about $130. So the perfect jacket for a day hike when there was iffy weather, but also the perfect jacket for the commuter, the raincoat for the commuter, let's say. And I can't emphasize enough the impact the Precip had on the outdoor apparel market. When I was in GoLite in 2007, so 8 years after the Precip launched, we launched a product that we described internally as the, quote, $99 Marmot Precip, right? Like, oh, we're going to do just like the Precip, but it's going to be cheaper, so we're going to eat their lunch, And it, like much of what GoLite tried, failed. But through that, I learned that rooting the value of something in the price tag rarely works. So at least something good came from that. The last thing Marmot made that was pretty cool was the Isotherm, which was part of Polartec's Alpha insulation launch in 2013. But even that was quickly forgotten as Marmot descended further into irrelevancy. And you kind of have to ask, what gives? Why did Marmot's Mount Rushmore peers ascend while Marmot lost footing to the point that I'm calling them a zombie brand? And like with most things, you have to look at their ownership. And like with most outdoor brands who have been around long enough, that's an interesting story. So Marmot's founders were Eric Reynolds, Dave Huntley, and Tom Boyce, and they owned the brand from 1974 until 1990, when after botching their entire winter product line, there was a lot of botching in most outdoor brands at that time, a lot of inconsistency. The brand at that point was taken over very briefly by a Wall Street investment firm called Spear, Leeds & Kellogg, who then sold the brand to Odyssey International. This is where it gets interesting, because Odyssey was a Hong Kong-based conglomerate that at the time also owned Sierra Designs, Head, and the North Face. So at one point, one owner had all of those brands. Then in 1993, Odyssey went bankrupt, and Marmot's management brand rallied to raise $3.5 million to buy the brand out of bankruptcy. And this might be the high watermark for Marmot, because while they went back to being independently owned pretty quickly, while Sierra Designs and the North Face were impacted by the Odyssey bankruptcy for much longer, which allowed Marmot to grab market share. That lasted pretty well until 2004, when Marmot was acquired by K2, who was then acquired by Jarden, who really kicked off the vanillification of Marmot, because then Jarden was acquired by Newell in 2016, who really finished them off. And for a 50-year-old brand, there's a lot of typical stuff here. I could probably do a whole other episode on the aforementioned Sierra Designs, who actually predates Marmot by 7 years in terms of when the brand was founded. But while Sierra Designs is an important brand in the history of our industry, I don't think anyone would slot them alongside the others I put on Outdoor Mount Rushmore. And unlike the others on Outdoor Industry Mount Rushmore, the recent run of ownership has repeatedly let Marmot down. Again, there are all sorts of examples here, but the bottom line is that when a brand moves from independently owned to being owned by a corporate overlord, the emphasis moves from innovative ways to solve the wants and needs of the outdoor enthusiast to make more money. It's kind of like that scene in Goodfellas when Sonny Buns gets Paulie to become a partner in his restaurant, only instead of, being, mobster and restaurant stuff that then, Paulie and Sonny have to deal with, it's just outdoor gear stuff. Hey, that new colorway didn't land with consumers. Fuck you, pay me. Our product launch was delayed because the factory lost a shipment of zippers. Fuck you, pay me. Our entire outerwear strategy was wrong. Fuck you, pay me. And sometimes that leads to a brand being sold or shuttered, like we talked about last week with Vask. And if you ask me, getting old Yellered is definitely preferable to becoming a zombie outdoor brand like poor Marmot. So, Dave, I'm sure you have a lot of additional thoughts on Marmot and zombie brands, so get on in here. Come on in, Dave.
That's where I need the sound effect of the door creaking shut. Right,
coming out of the shadows.
Right.
We're opening the cave door,
which is an interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think the zombie brand is actually a perfect description of brands like this. They're just kind of ambling along, neither dead nor alive, and I think that fits Marmot well. Look. I'm going to focus kind of just on the last, 10 years or so in terms of where they have come. And it does seem to me, and this is actually, now that I say that, probably predates this, but it seems that even before the Newell acquisition, Marmot has done their level best to not stand out, right? If you look at their communication.
Hey, that's a little too bold, guys. Let's dial that back.
That's right. Do you have something in a beige? This taupe is really outlandish, right? Towing, I guess, what you would call the core outdoor line of branding, their shift into apparel, away from equipment. Look, all very solid reasons, but it's just definitely the core outdoor playbook. It's kind of like it's a raft of unshaven men and women smiling while hiking and holding their camp-made cup of coffee with steam wafting into the morning air. Look, I get it. I love that whole theme, but that's just kind of where they've stopped and started with their brand. And like I said, I'm guilty of deploying these same kind of tropes in messaging. You need them to show that you belong, but that's just kind of what their brand is. And I would say that Marmot really, especially with their kind of let's call it up and down past with different forms of PE ownership, they've never really considered their brand as a co-equal part of their innovation equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as an OG brand, then they didn't really need to. They could stay focused on their product. They helped define the norms of the industry. They had placement already within this narrow and gate-kept channel. Reorder was on speed dial for a few of those brands. Well, actually, there wasn't speed dial back then, so maybe it was just more like they were on a notepad. But the idea
I think
is
they're still using notepads. At Newell.
right. So you can see why they would build into that type of kind of, I don't call it a rut, but definitely a line of thinking. But clearly, we have seen where the industry's going for 20, 30 years. The importance of brand is not something that has crept on us and caught us by surprise.
It's everything in this space.
Well, and look, North Face, Patagonia, Merrell, Timberland, they all got the memo. They all got the memo in the 90s.
Oh, I'm breaking Merrell's balls, but like they know who they are,
and
right?
they invested in communication of who they are to both a core and outside audience, broader audience, a long time ago. So they saw that coming, and brands like, because of that ownership sketch, and you look, North Face really, as much as we also like to kind of pick on VF, they knew what they had with North Face, and they helped it grow and realize what it could be. But this goes back to this kind of the folks that are getting into these outdoor brands. I feel like what you have is this larger sense of decisions about themes and tactics that are meant to stand out and be noticed, that are meant to embrace this niche culture that has always been a little bit outside of the mainstream and prides itself on such. You have the folks that make these decisions that are typically people who've spent most of their time blending in. They are not the mavericks and the pioneers who pioneer the industry or that leverage their life savings into a house full of unsold inventory based on a dream or an idea. They're not the folks who self-define their counterculture or that live off the beaten path or take these activities and do these things that most people don't do, right? The choices that they make, the brands that they choose to associate, they're from outside of that. And that's not necessarily a crime in itself. It's just, it means it's tougher to catch the vibes of what those consumers are going to be attracted to, what maybe the permissions that your brand actually does have within the market, and which then gives you a guidance of how quickly or where we can take steps to broaden without alienating that group. And those can be product decisions, they can be brand decisions. So I think all of that goes into how kind of Marmot finds itself. And I've for a long time called it a pink shirt or a neon shirt theory, right? That basically brands that stand out is like someone who's wearing that neon shirt. And, and it takes a braver soul to do that. And if you look around the boardrooms that are making these decisions, you're not going to see a lot of neon. You're going to see a lot of khaki. You're going to see a lot of collars. And I'll say it, Colin, you're going to see a lot of white shirts. And their instinct is to blend
Pregnant
in.
pause between white and shirts.
Their instinct is to blend in. And so what this means is you get folks who are used to blending in, making decisions about these brands and what will connect with people and identify with. And it always falls short. And so these folks making these decisions, they don't have a real read on the consumer. And so at best you get Me Too. Okay, which is, again, the kind of the typical outdoorsy thing over and over. At best, you get Me Too, blend-in type marketing. You get incremental product, lowercase I innovation or iteration. And you get this maniacal focus on broader, wider, faster market saturation versus a deliberate build of that foundation, right? And I think so with that, it's not really surprising that Newell is struggling with what to do with Marmot.
So after they published the results, SGB did a follow-up with comments from Newell Brand President and CEO Chris Peterson. They also released on Friday. And by the way, if this gets to Chris Peterson, you're always welcome to come on the show. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a little bit more about the strategy for Marmot. The thing that I found interesting in a lot of the comments that were posted in this SGB article from Peterson were they're largely focused on Coleman. And I think this kind of goes into sort of support a lot of what kind of you're saying. You know, Coleman is a legacy brand, hundreds of years old. The Lantern is a big deal, right? We're finding collectors now for their old products. They've launched a new campaign on Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. Coleman is pardon the pun, but like as a prime brand to go on a broadcast like that on that platform on Amazon, given what they sell and what they do. Not a mention in here about Marmot. And, and I don't know their balance sheet. Maybe, I don't know how profitable. Maybe they're making just enough money on Marmot that they can kind of just keep it in that zombie state forever, and it doesn't matter. All I know is, again, I mentioned it in the newsletter yesterday. I shot some texts and emails to some folks I know at the retail market, and the overwhelming response is, yeah, they don't matter anymore. Like, they're irrelevant. And the thing that's kind of sad to me about that, and this echoes back to the vast sundowner of it all, or just the Vask of it all. Exiting the 90s, I mean, you heard that part in the history that I talked about how they got a leg up on the North Face. Now, I think that probably didn't last super long because shortly after that, the North Face hit in a more pop culture sense. But from an outdoor authenticity point of view, I was working outdoor retail in the 90s. Marmot was the shit. It was right up there with Dana Designs and Gregory and when Hardware came along, all of these brands. And to just sort of now you get to the point where we're multiple generations past that, you can't rely on that. You can't even, how do you even leverage that history to kind of get it back? Young people aren't going to care unless you're just truly going to go after guys our age, right? And even then, we're going to be dubious because it hasn't mattered for 20 years.
People aren't going to care if you don't give them reasons to care, Colin. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Could they care? Of course they could. You have all of the pieces that you need from a brand storytelling to create a contemporary, desirable brand. But you have to choose to do that. And I can see, too, I can see the allure of White Coleman for sure. Much bigger upside in a sense.
Makes so much sense.
Right? And I can also see those meetings right now. Right, they've seen what's gone on with the category of tumblers. I mean, look what Stanley has done. You know that they're sitting there. Why can't we have Stanley? We've got Coleman. We can be cool too, right? So let's go on Amazon and be cool. Okay.
Well, popular is different than cool.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Again, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And look, but this is okay. I go back to this is really not surprising from a Newell and why they are struggling to what to do with Marmot. And you're just what you said, kind of what they're doing with Coleman makes a lot of sense. They're going straight to the broad, right? Going to leapfrog all of that foundation building work that you need to do, okay, to go straight for the broad. And this is what they did actually with Marmot. So if you go back to when they bought the brand in 2016 or before that, the first major kind of push that they did, and again, I can see them talking around, how can we we're going to leverage this authentic brand that we have, and it's going to be this big juggernaut like Columbia and Patagonia. We're going to go out there, and this is going to be huge, broad. Oh my gosh. So what do you do to get big, fast? You do a Super Bowl commercial. Oh my gosh, right? And if a Super Bowl commercial will anthropomorphize the Marmot, it'll be cute. And we'll use music from Flight of the Conchords to show that we're also cool, that we've got alt credibility, we're quirky, and we'll have this safe white guy enjoying nature with this cute rodent running around the outdoors until the joke turns into some kind of weird, how dare you try and kiss me thing at the end. And it's to pay off this broad tagline called Fall in Love with the Outdoor. They have the guy trying to kiss the Marmot who rejects him. Like, what? And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I am not.
I'll link I'm sure it's on YouTube.
I am not kidding. Okay, this actually does happen. Okay, it
I swear
really does
I am not
play.
making this up.
The dude hits on a Marmot and is rejected, and that's the culmination of their multi-million-dollar spot on the Super Bowl.
$1 million right there.
More than that, and and they went with a big ad agency to make it. Like it has Pixar level. CGI. I mean, the Marmot's fur looks great, but this is what they deemed appropriate and as a spend to ignite and fortify the Marmot brand. And I can see on paper why this was attractive. I mean, look, I think crass animal puppets can also be funny too. This was just not funny.
No, and then so that was the big launch right from there, which by the way doesn't speak to anybody based off of the creative. It doesn't, and even still putting Marmot in a Super Bowl ad doesn't make sense to begin with because how many people watch the Super Bowl who know even what Marmot is? Then the next thing, the only other thing they really tried since then was back in the just a few years ago. They were trying to there were a lot of articles on Outside Online and a few other places about, Marmot's going to reinvigorate and change their product line and get with the times. And here comes the resurgent of Marmot. But the overwhelming theme of that sort of not rebrand, but rejiggering of the product line was we're going to be more for everybody and less about for the person who climbs Everest. And if you go back and look at the products that have made Marmot who they are and successful, they're top of the mountain products. And so that's a much harder thing to do, frankly. Like, we're going to go now compete with everybody who's already doing it well. And even though we have a heritage in a certain point, and I get it, and it speaks so it's easier on paper to say, let's just make a lot more, interesting outdoorsy looking stuff. It clearly hasn't worked. I think a year and a half, 2 years ago, no, probably less than 2 years ago, they had a layoff. All those people who worked on that project now seemingly gone. And now we are where we are, where Newell is largely talking about Coleman.
The reason you do that is because it's much easier to find the research data in your presentation to management that supports why we should go after that market opportunity, because it's way bigger and those numbers are bigger and the dollars
the research
look bigger.
Data is I took a picture of the floor at REI.
Right. And so you can see why they would do that. But again, I think what you're talking about now is kind of issues of brand life cycle. Where does Marmot fit in the ability? Right. Can they get to Super Bowl brand status? Of course they can. Can that be used actually as a tactic for a consumer good to get broad awareness quickly? Yes, you can. In that way, the way they executed, we go back to execution and reading the room.
Well, if you're going for the bestiality crowd, maybe.
They're loyal. But I would say that, since that time, really the brand has never recovered. And it's not because of the shock of its poor execution. It's just more of the types of tactics that they've taken. I've seen nothing, like you said, there's nothing but shrinkage and layoffs and hand-wringing and what we're not doing. Let's just be clear, too. This is an ownership issue, okay? I have and you have too interacted with many people from Marmot over the years. People who are thoughtful about the industry. They are passionate about their brand.
Yes.
They know what needed to be done, right? And they just weren't supported in this way or had these crazy,
Correct.
unrealistic expectations that were never actually in the cards, at least in that time frame. And I expect that there are folks there too that are doing that right now. And so this is definitely just an inability to read the room of the brand that you have now, and how do you build the stair-step structure to broader acceptance while also reinforcing and making yourself relevant with that core industry that you're a part of.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I kind of yada over the Jarden years. At the time that Newell acquired them, I don't think they were any worse position probably than like a Mountain Hardwear was, or any other sort of the more core brands that were now not as cool as they used to be. But whereas you saw Columbia over the last few years really invest in hardware, invest in a rebrand, invest in the legacy, and their rebrand last year at Hardware got a lot of notoriety because it was like, oh, it's like 1993 again. Let's lean into what made us the cool brand back in the 90s. Marmot, to your point, we just highlighted the two biggest things that have come out of Marmot in the last 10 years. It's a Super Bowl ad, a poorly executed Super Bowl ad, and then an attempted rebrand to appease the masses. And, when you kind of, to your point, it doesn't mean, you're right. They could definitely come back. I think it's just going to continue to get harder and harder because the brand just doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore.
This is where the zombie sound effect would be important.
Actually, we're apologizing to the Marmot that was in that commercial.
We are. Yeah, I've heard he's had a very checkered future from that.
He got paid scale,
alcoholism.
They didn't let him at the craft services table.
I believe we had a story about that rogue pack of marmots in the national parks. I would not be surprised if... I think he was...
that was... Now he's just an extra in those things.
Right.
The guy used to be a star.
That's right. He's like the Corey Feldman of rodents.
Hey, Corey Feldman's having a moment, at least on TikTok.
Yeah, go, Corey. Right on.
Well, again, Chris Peterson, anybody over at Newell, we would love to discuss this more. I'd be curious. Maybe there's something we don't know. I think it is a brand that has a long history in the industry, so it'd be interesting to see what the plans are for it going forward. But until we get one of them to come on the show, I think it's just time to move on to say that it's time. It's time for our weekly segment to be sure you're getting more out of the outdoors. It's time for More with Thermore.
Maybe Marmot could use some Thermore. Just
Hey, give them something to talk
connecting
about.
the dots here. Yeah.
Maybe.
Right.
How about Coleman?
Nope.
Coleman?
Why not? I could see
insulated lanterns.
Dude, right? Insulated lantern with a thermos.
The insulation in the thermos.
And lantern. A lantern
Right?
Thermos with
Thermore, we
insulation.
can't just keep giving you these good ideas
Yeah,
for free.
dude.
Like, let's go. Like this is
That's right.
we're gonna renegotiate our ad rates for 2025.
The Coleman thermos lantern with Thermore insulation.
Thermore.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think
I'm so
too.
into it.
I am too.
Well, last week in the segment, we talked about Lolay's insulated quilted joggers, which are warm as hell thanks to Thermore Eco Down. And this week, we're going to keep the Lolay love going and highlight another piece that they made with Thermore's Eco Down. And that's the women's 3/4 bomber jacket. It's one of the more popular pieces on Lolay's web store. The 3/4 bomber jacket is made with a feminine quilted design, a water-repellent finish, and an incredibly soft hand. But the best feature is the one we already mentioned. It's Thermore's Eco Down. 100% recycled, it's vegan. Eco Down is the sustainable alternative to down feathers and is doing all of the heavy lifting in the 3/4 bomber jacket by working to keep you warm on chilly days while out for a hike or enjoying a day in the city. Because whether it's making amazing new garments or thermoses or staying warm and safe out on the trail, you can do more with Thermore. All right, let's get into a few more headlines here. First, per the Daily, thanks to another incredible quarter for Hoka, Deckers has raised their 2025 outlook. Hoka ended the third quarter up nearly 35% over Q3 of 2023. They weren't alone. Other outdoor brands in Deckers' outdoor portfolio recorded profitable quarters, with UGG being up 13% and Dave's favorite Teva up 2.3%. Other brands at Deckers marked a 15% decline. So it really was, though, Hoka just leading the charge. So Hoka hit $2 billion for the first time when looking back over the preceding 12 months, another big development for them. So, I don't know, Dave, is there anything that can stop or slow down Hoka? I mean, they're a freaking rocket ship right now.
Yeah, other than an extinction level event, I don't think so. Look, part of this is clearly trend. So they have got the wave and they are fulfilling it, and that's you just can't stop. And that will have a horizon to it for sure. But at the same time, they've created a new elevation of a product that I think it fulfills just this innate sense of comfort. It looks comfortable. It feels comfortable. Those are really strong kind of personal benefits to have a brand wrapped around. And so I don't see why they would necessarily need to back away from what they've got. It got this place in the market to stand for that type of benefit. But in terms of just the crazy growth piece of this, there's clearly a trend element to it.
I'm trying to think about the last brand, at least in the footwear space,
UGG.
that would be a comp.
UGG.
Yeah, UGG. I mean, I go to Five Fingers, but that was so short. Like, this is now like sustained over a long time. But you think it's UGG, the original when UGG first showed up in the early 2000s?
It shares the idea that it was fulfilling this innate human need of comfort, and it's a product that exudes that sensibility from its sightline. Like, you just look at it and it looks comfortable. The Hoka, its profile on the wall, and you look at footwear as a kind of a profile type business, right? What is that shape? What is that appeal on the wall from a profile? It just looks comfortable, right? And they're standing for that. And now their colors are attractive. That's part of the trend piece. So they attract your eye to something that's comfortable. I think that's what UGG was able to do as well at its time, right? You just looked at it and that you instantly got what it was going to provide you as a customer.
I saw someone posting on Threads, and they said, "Can't Hoka just make like some normal-looking shoes, like color-wise?" They were talking about and I'm like, no, let them be weird and wild and crazy colors. Like, I feel like that is integral to their brand. And also for those of us in like the 2000s who wanted different colors, and all we got were like brown and gray and black. This is great. Like, yes, please let colors flourish. They're running shoes. They don't need to be boring.
There's navy, and there is a dark green. So I don't see what you're complaining about. Right. Yeah, I would love to know how many kind of black, gray, blue Hoka sells versus
Sold
some
versus
of their
the
other
other
things,
ones?
because that's
a
all
good
we
question,
see. And look,
actually.
we do see them in the wild too. It's not like they're just ending up on newspaper articles or in the window, right? In terms of like people are buying them and you're seeing them on feet. So there's something
The
going
airports
on
where
with
you go
that.
to see the shoe trends. What are people wearing at the airport?
Right.
And it's all Hoka.
Well, which though that might be a little bit of a self-selective environment because I'm traveling and I'm totally dialed for comfort.
Right.
But still, I love seeing what they've done. Their color selection is fantastic.
So the other brands showing a 15% decline leads me to ask, or notice anyway, that in this report, Ahnu, the super shoe, notice glaringly absent from any talk about how the new launch of Ahnu, aka the super shoe, is doing. I can only imagine they're in that
white
15%
Hoka?
decline. Yeah, white, exactly.
Right.
White and black Hoka.
White Hoka.
Where are you, Ahnu?
No.
We're going to keep tabs on Ahnu right up to the point where they can it for a second time. All right. All right, next I'm going to take a victory lap because as I predicted here on the Rock Fight last week, the Daily reported that Dick's Sporting Goods announced they would be closing 5 of its 8 public land stores. Those 5 stores will be converted into other Dick's, quote unquote banners. Most likely their House of Sport franchise. The remaining public lands which have a smaller footprint will remain open to test the viability of a smaller format store in the outdoor specialty market. This to me is what has made sense all along. House of Sport is an experiential format for Dick's that includes outdoor elements. There's a climbing wall, there are yoga classes, there's also batting cages and golf driving ranges and services like bike servicing. They have bike techs in there and golf regripping. This fits what Dick's is more than trying to mold their brand into being traditional outdoor. They can dabble in the more athletic aspects of outdoor while being truer to the Dick's brand. Kind of reminds me of what maybe a large format Play It Again Sports would be without the used gear, obviously, and unfortunately. Or, as our Northeast listeners will recall, a large format City Sports, which also, when it was around, blended outdoor and athletic and traditional sporting goods. So I made my prediction that Public Lands would transition to House of Sport when House of Sport debuted to rapturous reviews. And I understand why Dick's would want to go full outdoor and try to compete with REI. But House of Sport just simply makes more sense for who and what Dick's is. And as for the remaining Public Lands shops, I mean, I guess I'm going to keep it. I got to ride my prediction. I guess they won't last very long. And especially if House of Sport grows, they'll either close those smaller formats or create a smaller footprint of House of Sport because those shops are too small to be, a traditional Dick's Sporting Goods. But mostly, though, just want to say you heard it here first on the Rock Fight, folks. Public Lands is going away. Now, I did reach out Todd Spoleto, who's the president of Public Lands over at Dick's. I've exchanged a few emails. I'm trying to get someone over there, if not Todd, somebody else, to come on and talk about this on the show. I have not set that up yet. I'll keep you guys posted. But Dick's, what do you think about Dick's and Public Lands here, Dave?
Well, look, like we said, we've seen this coming. It's for sure. It was always kind of an imperfect fit. Look, I don't like it when any kind of anybody who's putting their dollar in support of outdoor recreation and the industry, I am down with. So even when they launched, is it a perfect match? No. But is it is it good to have another big box option? Yeah, a big box option to even REI. Yep, it sure is. And I still think there's probably a space for where they were trying to fill. It's probably being filled by Sierra right now. I mean, in a weird way.
Yeah.
How long until Public Lands is just a shop and shop within this House of Sport, which that's what I see coming, right? Which would make sense too. It's just not its own independent store, but why not brand your outdoor section of your larger multi-sport experience that way? I just it totally makes sense. So yeah, like we said, I like to see the effort. Good for them.
Totally. I think it's cool. And I like the fact that they're willing to pivot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we get so much stuck in these, like, it's got to be this way because it always was this way, or we don't want it to try something new. And it's like, look, do I think about, we've talked on the show about how I'll go into a Dick's and there's a lot of what I find at REI at a traditional Dick's. Yeah. So they're already succeeding with Patagonia as a vendor and the North Face as a vendor and all this stuff. Why not?
Of course.
And then they also to say, well, let's evolve that to this House of Sport model. and like, well, this is killing it because it's closer to our original brand. Well, let's move off of this, true outdoor thing. It makes a lot of sense.
Will we see a tight Marmot collection in the public land shop and shop in the Dick's House of Sports?
Dix, you might want to give Newell a call. There might be some open to listen on the Marmot brand. They could become your house brand.
Open to listen, open to buy. I think we have something here.
Yeah. Well, anyway, good on you, Dix. We'll keep an eye on that, I suppose. All right. Well, we're going to take one quick break to hear about the Great Malden Outdoors, and then we're going to come back with our parting shots. This episode of The Rock Fight is brought to you by the Great Malden Outdoors, an outdoor enablement campaign in the city of Malden, Massachusetts, and the brains behind this initiative, Darren Josie. He's here with me right now. Darren, first of all, what is an outdoor enablement campaign?
An outdoor enablement campaign provides 4 things: advertising, resources, programming, and youth development. These are the 4 things that I believe are really important to getting more people outside.
So why is this campaign important to DEI efforts in the outdoor industry?
We have to start by getting more people outside, and that can start their journey from 1, becoming someone who just enjoys outdoor recreation as a lifestyle, but 2, a path for a job. No one told me that going outside and rock climbing could lead to a job one day, or fishing, or bike riding. Didn't know that was a thing until I got into the industry, and I want to change that and start that journey a lot earlier for way more people in our society.
Hey, man, and lastly, how can outdoor brands and retailers help or participate?
Go to thegreatmaldenOutdoors.com, click on the contact button, and reach out. We are always looking for donations for gear, funds, and expertise. You can lend your existing staff to lead an online course, or if you're in the New England area, come on down and lead a class. We're looking for more programming.
Head to thegreatmaldenOutdoors.com and click contact to build a partnership today. All right, it's time for the parting shot. Dave?
So, okay, Colin, my parting shot has to do with the announcement of Columbia undergoing a massive, quote-unquote, rebrand, which, I'm usually good for a good rebrand, when it makes sense. But my shot is the fact that they have gone outside of the country, in fact, to find a London-based ad agency, big ad agency, McDonald's, Unilever, big brands to take on their rebrand because, Portland, Oregon, and North America didn't have enough creative juice for them.
God, if only New York City was part of the United States.
They've got, to be fair, the agency does have a New York location, of course,
Whoa, okay.
Right. But look, I hope they take this in a great place. I don't have a lot of confidence in Columbia's ability. They've worked with some pretty great creative people in the past, and they've just never, ever really put out stuff that I would think is interesting or going to move the market in any way. I think they tend to have an interesting view of themselves as not really this outdoor brand that they are, even a mainstream outdoor brand. I think they aspire to be something far more sophisticated, which it just always seems to be a little bit of incongruity there, but who knows? But good for them. They're going to spend a ton of money, and they're going to do a lot of iterations and a lot of binders with multiple pages, and a lot of research, and we'll see what happens.
Do you think, though, because if they could stay in the lane that Columbia sort of owns, is that sort of, that we're talking about earlier, like the khaki Larry outdoor lane, could they come up with something? What could be interesting about that? Or do you think that now the chops of this creative agency are way too, they won't do anything that boring? It's going to be high
concept. It's going to be high concept, and it'll be beautiful, and it'll be thoughtful. And like I said, it belongs on a big mainstream broadcast. And their brand is at a size of that. It's just the nature of the individual who likes to go outside or to see themselves. It would be the same thing if only advertising an SUV is something to pick up a drink order at a drive-through, right? I mean, is that the reality? Yeah, of course it is. But that's not that's not what you wrap your brand or your capability.
That's not your commercial.
Yeah, right.
That's not your Super Bowl commercial.
Right. So, like I said, it's just kind of a. It's just kind of a what you want your brand to aspire to be versus being literal about what it is on paper. Right. And I just.
When do you think we'll see results of this hire? Year from now?
Yeah. Again, they just did the announcement. I don't know how long down the path they are. I mean, that, like I said, there's going to be a lot of revisions in that, Colin. There's going to be meeting after meeting after meeting.
Yeah.
To revise this.
It'll probably be fall 25 is probably when this would be the.
Probably. We'll see.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. My parting shot. Well, folks, if the notion of another Trump presidency wasn't enough to make you think that the apocalypse is nigh, then this should. Crocs has partnered with Bark to create Crocs for pets. That's right. You can now buy Crocs for your dog. And I often feel like the lone voice of reason, lobbying to return to a crocless world where we only create shoes that require real design, craftsmanship, and manufacturing acumen rather than slipping our feet into foam prisons that make you look like a dumbass simply because they feel squishy. And while I long ago recognized that I can be objectively right about this because I am, I also know that my pushback on Crocs will have zero impact on the world, given how the Crocs virus has spread in the past 2 decades. But god damn it, what fucking good does it do you Crocs enthusiasts to put fucking Crocs on your fucking dog? Outdoor dog booties have been a thing for a very long time, and there are specific instances where you do want to protect your dog's tootsies from snow or sharp rocks or other elements that can ruin your favorite hiking buddy's day. But I know when I'm going to see Crocs on a dog, and it's going to be at the airport on a giant doodle whose fur has been dyed to match their Gen Z owner's hair, who is claiming that their dog is required for their mental stability to fly like an hour and a half from San Diego to fucking Phoenix or something ridiculous. And that's the dog that's going to have Crocs on. And everyone should right now give me kudos for my ability in that instance to just shake my head and let that shit go without saying something, so long as my seat is not next to them on that flight. Crocs are dumb. Crocs for your dog are dumber. Please, everyone, let's just stop being dumb. We can do better. And that's my parting shot.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I can tell you, Colin, that there are folks in, like, say, Florida that will agree with you completely because down there, Crocs swallow quite a few dogs.
Crocs for pets. Not what you think.
That's right. That's right.
This is a pet euthanasia agency. It's Crocs for your pets.
I got a Marmot for you.
My God. All right, man. Well, I guess that's the show. Should we wrap it up there?
I think we better.
All right. Well, the Rock Fight's a production of Rock Fight LLC. Our producer today, you heard him. He had a lot to say. It was David Karstad. Art direction provided by Sarah Gensert. I'm Colin Truth. Thanks for listening. And he's here to take us out. It's Krista Makes. And he's going to sing. He's in Australia right now, but he's going to sing it right now from here for us, the Rock Fight fight song. We'll see you next time, Rock Fighters.
Rock Fight!